Well, before we get to Tim Pool, Matt's itching for this. I did want to do a quick update on Peru, um, and also make a kind of point just on the same thing is like how the media begins to prepare people for the unthinkable. But just to set the stage, there's all of this horrible nonsense with Keiko Fujimori and her allies basically trying to overturn the election results, very similar to Trump's playbook. And there was a moment where it looked like they might be able to at least cast enough doubt that there might be an intervention or something like that. But that was pushed back. It was unsuccessful. And personal shout out to members of the DSA who went there along with a Progressive International to be election observers and to sort of stand strongly when these allegations first came out and say, nope, these are clean and fair elections, right? And Pedro Castillo wins that election and has now been sworn in as president. For people who are unfamiliar, absolutely incredible, radical, new kind of politics, a rural teacher and farmer, from and indigenous too, and people don't mention that enough, indigenous as well, made a political campaign that brought in the forgotten and those who have been sort of sitting outside of politics in a very clear anti-capitalist, pro-working class message.
And did enough to keep the squishy PMCs in Lima to turn out against Fujimori, which I think is very interesting and a good example and something to aspire to.
Yeah, when we had Austin, who again is just an incredible human being, and we're very lucky to have him on the left on the show. He noted that, and just so people don't misunderstand us, the cities went for Keiko overwhelmingly, but enough so that members of Nuevo Peru, have gone into coalition government with Castillo, or basically are part of that coalition. So that kind of more urban left has inroads with this new formation under Castillo. And it's an incredibly inspiring moment. And I just want to give people an update over, these first few days of the Castillo administration. One, and this is the thing that everyone's been freaking out about, as he put in Aguero Abelido, who I hope I pronounced his name right. I'm sorry if I didn't, who is an ardent Marxist and a radical and a very serious member of Peru Libre, the party that Pedro Castillo ran under, to become his prime minister and also his chief of staff, which obviously is an incredibly important position and will be important both legislatively and also for his outlook and interactions with people across the country, right? This is a signaling from Pedro that he's not going to forget the people brought into power and they want to go in a different direction, right? And we'll get to the media freak out in a second, but I just want to give people the facts on the ground to start, right? And he's created a cabinet that has a lot of different folks in it from, generally a left-wing perspective, but from moderate to centrist, more establishment folks to radicals. And has brought in a lot of people, as you mentioned earlier, people from Nuevo Peru into in the party as well, right? And into government as well. So a lot of folks are coming into government. We'll see what happens in these early days. But there was this freak out about the prime minister basically being a Marxist, especially for the financial press, that Pedro Castillo is now showing his true roots as a horrible, evil Marxist communist who's going to steal all your children and do all this kind of stuff. Well, if you could hold up on this 1 second, Matt,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Because I want to do that in a tight second, because I think you can really make a great point here about how the media sort of creates ideas in people's heads. But I just wanted to note too, in addition to putting radicals in the cabinet, he also put in Pedro Franque to be the finance minister, who's very much an establishment kind of politician, not somebody who's particularly radical, in a position that obviously matters a lot to the rich folks, right? That's just what's happening. And I just want people to know that. But if you go to my tweet first, Matt, I just wanted to show okay, so before you bring this up, I know everybody who's listening to this is not, reading Peruvian newspapers and following Peruvian news very closely. You might have heard about it on this show. You might be interested in it because of that. But, the way that we all sort of go through our lives, you hear about things in other countries when something big happens, right? And then you sort of have a general understanding from that, right? And it's important to note that because this is how they do this kind of really nasty manipulation, right? So if you're just a person who is not watching this show, you heard, okay, there was a big election in Peru and they elected a left-wing person, right? what starts to go through your head when you see these headlines? If you pull up my tweet here, Matt, these are just, I just typed in Pedro Castillo, Peru. This is the first thing that come up. Leftist political novice sworn in as Peru's president. Peru's democracy is at a breaking point. Foreign policy. Peru's mining executives anxious as Castillo's left-wing administration begins.
I mean, that seems like good news to me.
Yeah. And this last one is Pedro Castillo's presidency already doomed. If you see something like that, right? And again, you're just a casual person, and look, these are, foreign policy magazine, right? Those are the guys who do the real reporting and pay attention to these things. If that's the kind of stuff that's being fed to you, right? And I don't think that everybody has the time to like debunk what's going on in every country constantly. I just wanted to make this point, not that it's new to anybody, but this is just a very clear example of the stuff that we argue on the left, that there is a lot of manufacturing of consent. And it should also be noted, just as a part of the as a part of the recap, that there has been a push from the new mining minister of Peru to say that we want there to be a renegotiation of what happens with the profits from the riches of our country. Again, an extremely reasonable thing. But of course, if you are an unreasonable capitalist who makes all of your money off of exploiting other people, you can hear the alarm bells ringing.
The way that they shriek at things like that, and it just fucks up the entire world. Right, for the last like fucking century.
I mean, and it's disgusting too. These people have no right to ask that this again, and this is like, man, I don't have it up for you. I just want to, I'm gonna send this to you real quick, Matt. This piece, just because the language that's coming from Pedro Castillo's government on this stuff is so mild. It's almost like, you almost feel as a leftist like you need to be urging them on a little bit.
Yeah,
on
sellouts.
Yeah, let me see. Higher taxes are the main worry we have now, said Pablo de la Flor, the head of the National Society of Mining, Oil and Energy, which represents mining companies. The expectation on the side of industry is to clarify the doubts we still have about the sector. The administration has said it will work with all players in the mining sector to create a new deal that will address social profitability. Newly installed Minister of Energy and Mines, Ivan Moreno, told Reuters that this means mines should not only make money for private companies to generate tax revenue, but should also help the population through improved infrastructure, respect for indigenous communities, and better environmental protection. And then this absolute pig, De La Flor, says social probability is already an inherent part of the industry, which is complete nonsense. What's been going on in Peru, specifically with the mining industry, have been egregious examples of cruel treatment of workers, clear ignoring of any kind of environmental concerns that the people around there have. And that's why people showed up and voted for Pedro Castillo there. Yeah, I mean, it's despicable, and it's just this is clear in front of your eyes. I know a lot of people will comment on this and they'll say like, "Well, is the coup coming? Is the coup coming?" I think I think we won. I understand why people make that kind of comment, but let's not get so detached that we just make comments like that, because that's obviously is a disaster, and you don't want to be right about those kind of things. Right. But this is how they lay the seeds to do extreme damage. If it doesn't even have to be something as overt as that. That's how you undermine a presidency. That's how you prevent there to be investment. Remember, Pedro Castillo became the president. He doesn't control all of the resources in the country, right? The bourgeoisie, the ruling class, has the ability to take money out of the country. That's what they do, right? And you start to make excuses like this in the international media, right? And that sort of lays like the groundwork for mass disinvestment policies from the ruling class, the rich and powerful, right? That's the damage that they're interested in doing. It doesn't always have to be that kind of overt thing, and it's extremely damaging. And I just think people should recognize that.
Yeah, man. So many people from our generation, I think, when you decide, hey, I'm going to use the internet to try to figure out which publications can help me inform myself about the world. The Economist, right? Like it's The Economist and stuff like that. And it's like, that gives you a great veneer of nuance and all that stuff. But ultimately, and I don't know if any of these examples from The Economist, but this is just this is the waters you're swimming in, right?
Mhm.
And it makes you defend horrible shit just because some mining executives are
Are
upset that.
mad that they might like not be able to pollute the water around their industries,
And
right?
so
I mean, give me a
and
break.
so you take completely anti-democratic attitudes based on what you thought was information, like good, unbiased information from the trusted business sources, right? And that's what it gets you. It amplifies that sort of shrieking into all of this rationale that is just sort of obfuscates the reality, which is this is greed, and
Mhm.
uh, and a system that's, yeah, like, I mean, the euphemisms like concerns about the sector and things like that. I just, man.
No, it's ridiculous. And act like, oh yeah, they already pay their social, what what's the word? Social prosperity or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just
that's like a classic, like, yeah, like American Enterprise Institute argument, right? Like capitalism already does that for you.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I just say, like, to all the people who are listening to this show, right? This is the kind of stuff to be aware of. And this is the kind of stuff that you can personally be debunking to people in your circles and stuff like that, right? Because it's a very effective tool that they have. And that's the kind of thing I think I'd be more worried about debunking if you're, trying to help out friends and comrades in other countries, is look for this kind of stuff. 'Cause this is how they start to flex their muscles.
Right.